Hey everyone, Romeo here, a fellow Spanish language learner. In this video, I want to talk about one of the most common pieces of advice in language learning. If you want to speak better Spanish, just speak more Spanish. On the surface, that sounds completely reasonable. If you want to get better at speaking, then obviously you should speak. But I think that advice is incomplete, and depending on your situation, it could be misleading. Not because conversations are bad, conversations are useful, but conversation by itself doesn't automatically build the Spanish structures that you're missing. That's the part people usually skip. A few weeks ago, I was on a live stream and I mentioned that I don't really have a lot of Spanish conversations. I don't take regular Spanish conversation classes. I'm not on calls every day speaking Spanish. Outside of maybe talking to myself out loud or having a quick conversation with my Dominican barber every couple of weeks, I don't actually speak that much Spanish on a daily basis. And the person I was talking to was surprised. They were like, "Wait, really?" And that made me realize that I hadn't really explained why I don't rely on conversation practice as my main way to improve. The reason is simple. The bottleneck isn't the conversation. The bottleneck is whether I know how to say what I want to say. Either I can produce the sentence in Spanish or I can't. And if I can't produce something specific, I'm not expecting a random conversation to fix that in real time. I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to simplify it. I'll avoid it, or I'll say it incorrectly and move on. So my core idea is this: you can't reliably say what you haven't trained yourself to produce. If you don't know how to produce a word, a phrase, a tense, a pronoun pattern, or a sentence structure in Spanish, more conversation won't automatically make that structure appear. Conversation can expose the gap, but exposure isn't the same thing as training. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying conversations can't work. They absolutely can. If you're fully immersed in Spanish all day, that's different. If you're in a school environment where Spanish is being used constantly, people are correcting you, classmates are responding to you, and you're forced to use the language all day, then conversation can become a powerful training environment. But that's not the situation most independent learners are in. Most learners, like me, aren't immersed all day. They don't live in a Spanish-speaking home. They don't have someone correcting them every time they speak. They may have a few scattered chances to speak during the month. And in that limited time environment, conversation alone usually isn't enough. There isn't enough volume. There isn't enough correction or enough repetition. So for that learner, just speak more is incomplete advice, because in that environment, conversation practice often looks something like this. You sit down with someone, you try to express an idea, then you hit a wall. You don't know the word, you don't know the structure, you don't know how to put the sentence together fast enough, so you simplify the idea, or you avoid saying it, or you switch to something easier, and then the conversation continues, but nothing was fixed. Let me show you exactly what I mean. One of my personal weak points right now is double object pronouns. I'm working on them, but they're still slow, and honestly, I'm not good at using them yet. Let's take a simple sentence. I give the book to the boy. In Spanish, I can say, le doy el libro al niño. That sentence is comfortable for me. It's clear. It works. But if I want to compress it and say, I give it to him, now I have to process more at once. I have to recognize that to him is the indirect object. I have to know that el libro is masculine, so it becomes lo. And I have to remember that I can't say lelo. I have to change it to selo. So the compressed version becomes se lo doy. I understand that when I see it, but understanding it isn't the same as being able to use it quickly in conversation. So in real time, I'm probably going to use the version that I can access faster. Not because I don't want to use the double object pronoun version, but because I don't access it fast enough yet. And why don't I access it fast enough yet? Because I haven't trained it enough. That's the actual problem, not a lack of conversation. A lack of deliberate production practice with that structure is the problem. That's why someone can have conversation after conversation and still never force themselves to use double object pronouns. They can avoid them completely. Conversation can make you better at using what you already have, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll build what you're missing. So if I'm not having Spanish conversations every day, what do I do instead? I train the structures that I want to be able to say in conversation. That's the idea behind the reinforcement layer that I used and that I now recommend beginners to use in a 1 year to fluency tracker. In phase 2, you take Spanish and convert it into English so you know exactly what it means. Then you take English and convert it back into Spanish so that you know you can actually produce it, because recognition isn't enough. And that's also why I use now structured recall for my speaking practice. I take core Spanish structures in English and I produce them in Spanish. Volume 2 specifically helps me train object pronouns, including double object pronouns. The process is simple. I see the sentence, I say it in Spanish, then I verify it over and over again across different tenses, different structures, different sentence patterns, and different levels of complexity. So instead of hoping a conversation forces improvement, I deliberately train the structures I struggle with. And once you train those structures enough, conversations aren't slow. The goal isn't to stay dependent on slow translation forever. The goal is to make that process faster, cleaner, and eventually more automatic. That takes training, not just exposure. So if you're relying on conversation classes as your main way to improve your Spanish, the class may be useful, but it may not be fixing the actual bottleneck. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Are your Spanish conversations actually improving your Spanish, or are they just exposing the same gaps over and over again? Because if you can't say what you want to say, the conversation itself isn't the solution. The structure is. Anyway, if this video gave you clarity on that, go ahead and give it a like. And if you want to start training your ability to produce Spanish, not just recognize it, watch the next video, How to Practice Speaking Spanish. Until the next video, good luck on your journey to building more functional, usable Spanish. Peace.